that our reluctance to move past the kind of first problem we notice can sometimes be the most interesting symptom of the problem. It's kind of a meta problem. Because we end up getting kind of interested in solving the problems that we understand and having the kinds of fear and uncertainty and anxiety that we're used to having. And I've started to realize that part of my interest in talking to people like you is to figure out how to get you interested in being interested in being scared of more fascinating things. And at the same time, to scratch past the top layer of these problems to the extent that you're interested, to figure out what really goes on under the surface. We, as consumers of medicine, are all familiar with symptoms. And a symptom is, like you hear in like a Viagra commercial, right? Dry mouth, nausea, constipation, preapsis, is that what it's called? The kinds of things that you report to your physician as being the problem. Now, the physician's going to hear that, and even going to be pretty interested if it's something novel. But the thing that helps the physician really make a good decision about what to do are called signs. And signs are the things that the physician notices that he or she didn't need to ask you about. That's stuff like blood pressure. That's stuff like test results. That's stuff like things that you wouldn't even know to report. And they're both really useful, but when you put them together, you end up seeing a lot. And that's why sometimes I feel like a doctor. I feel like I don't know, an oncologist or a physician. And I feel like periodically I get this stream full of people who are almost dead from like a brain tumor the size of a volleyball. And they mainly want me to find out where they can get bigger hats. And with all of my might, I try to say to them, you've got a bigger problem than hats right now. And while I would be happy to point you to a local haberdashery, I'd really rather help you get rid of the tumor. And that's what the time and attention stuff is about. Because everybody thinks they're great at email, right? Nobody thinks they're bad at email. Except you guys. The people who actually show up for these things are sometimes the most open to the idea that there's an improvement opportunity. Do you notice that none of the people who make your life hell are in this room? They're on their BlackBerry somewhere else being great at email. The time and attention end up becoming these two really interesting kind of symbiotic yin and yang sort of things. You hear everybody talking about time management, right? You got to manage your time. Oh, are you using your time well? You got to get a new notebook and a calendar, blah, blah, blah. And what I've realized is that's like exercising one arm. Or even exercising just like one hand. And then whether you've got this withering atrophy on the other side, that I guess doesn't matter, Well, you've got to exercise both of them. When we talk about time and attention, I use those phrases in tandem a lot because I think they're like sides of a coin. They're very complementary. They, in fact, don't exist except in the relationship between each other. Time. What is time? Time is basically the raw material for our existence of doing things on the planet. Yeah, that's really important to manage. What is our attention, though? Our attention is the stuff that we notice, the things that we think about, the things that we allow or decide to look at and to keep, our attention. But if you don't figure out how to make those two work together, you're going to have problems. So if you only get good at managing your time, you become very efficient at doing something that potentially nobody cares about. Because how do you know if you're doing the right things? To paraphrase Stephen Covey, not a giant Stephen Covey fan, but he said like 3 things better than anybody else. And one of them is, how do you know if your ladder's against the right wall? I mean, yeah, I know that's about as penetrating as all the posters in the hallway, but teamwork, sailboat. But do you know what I mean? Have you ever done that, though? Have you ever found yourself, you've had a day where you worked really, 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 really hard, you didn't talk to anybody all day long, and then, you look at what you've done, and it's like, is this good? Is this even a thing? I'm here to tell you, people can spend 5 years doing that. This is why flea market art exists. If you don't expose yourself to anything but your own interest in how that time is spent, you're going to have a very disproportionate kind of product come out. Do you have a sense of the value of your time and attention in the same way? I don't have my wallet with me. But do you have that same sense as you do with cash? Do you remember being in college and being really poor? Some of you are still poor in college. When you got to pay those loans, you're going to be even poorer. But do you remember having you can either do laundry or you can eat? And that was, you don't really understand economics until it becomes that really kind of clear. Do you remember this feeling? Maybe not. Maybe you guys are all rich, but I was not. And I very clearly remember this roll of quarters can either feed me or give me clean shirts. And the shirts frequently lost. But you still have a sense. Like if you had a $100 bill and you lost it, you'd be bummed. Why? It's what economists call opportunity cost. A limited resource can go one and only one place. And once it's been expended there, it can't be reused for other things. This is why money is money. And not like a video game or something. It would totally lose its value if we just got to reuse the same $100 bill for everything we wanted. Obvious? Yes. And yet, how much of that sense do you have for your own time and attention? More pointedly, is it clear enough to you that you're willing to say and do things to protect that time and attention in a way that sometimes may not be easy or may not be simple? If I just grabbed you on the street and I said, what's the most important thing in your life? You would say something probably like, your family or your church group or, maybe your career, maybe, your kid or your pet or whatever. And the thing is, in some part of your heart, that's absolutely true. But do you have a sense of the extent to which your time and attention tracks to actually doing good stuff for that thing that you claimed is really important? Do you have an internal barometer that tells you how well that's going? In fact, is the thing that you claim important really important? Because if a lot of people actually looked at where their time and attention went, the parts that they do have control over, it would look like the most important thing in their life was Facebook. I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. It could be ESPN. It could be checking email. It really pays to ask yourself how that stuff tracks. I run this program. You don't want to run this forever, but it is very instructive. I run a program that's called Rescue Time. And Rescue Time is smart enough to watch every application, every document, every web page that you use all day long. So it just runs. You don't look at it. You don't see it. You don't do anything with it until you choose to. And then you go and you look at charts. That will show you exactly how many times you looked at one person's profile on Facebook. It will show you exactly how long you spent writing one toot for Twitter. It will show you to the most granular level, not how you think you spend your time, not the kind of person you imagine that you are, but the literal hours that you spent on stuff that would blow your mind. That is a great place to find leaks, because stuff does disappear. Other things. I think access, almost all of these things become like a double-edged sword. Access is so critical. How great is it that we have access to each other through stuff like email? It's fantastic. It really lowers the barrier to communication for as long as we can keep it healthy. But I said this in the talk yesterday, but the three things that made email really powerful and widely adopted are that it's cheap, it's easy, and it's flexible, which is great, right? It's cheap, anybody can get it. It's easy, you can do it from anywhere. It's flexible, it's awesome, you can put anything in an email. But the three things that really suck about email? It's cheap, it's easy, and it's flexible. It's cheap, so people are really careless with it. There's no scarcity. You can send email to everybody all day long. Email, email, email. It's easy, which means it's easy for me to send email, so it must be easy for everybody to deal with my email. And third, it sucks because it's flexible, which means that anything can be anything at any time with any expectation, and it's entirely up to me to decide what to do about it. It's harrowing, I think. But all of that stuff ends up contributing to the complications of the time and attention issue. Because you're the one who is kind of the single decider of how that access should go. Most of us leave our email program, in particular, set to automatically check. Do you guys mostly use Outlook? Probably? And am I correct in saying that when you turn on Outlook, it checks for email every 5 minutes? Same thing with Mail.app, which is the most popular Apple program. Have you guys ever done the math on that? I will do it for you. I didn't do this in my head. If you count for 5 minutes a day, every workday, that's 24,000 times a year. You checked for email 24,000 times last year. Which in itself, I think, is an interesting data point. I think the interesting wisdom to take from that is you asked or allowed the potential for 24,000 interruptions from literally any human being in the world who could fall onto a keyboard and make an email go to you. What is the practical component of that? You are tacitly telling yourself there is no work that you do in the entire universe that is more important than what anybody in the world has on their mind right that second. Am I putting too sharp a point on this? I don't think I am. The cheapness, the easiness, the flexibility. Could we have spam in 1940? Could we have had spam? No. Why? Because telegrams, any of that cost money. Spam exists for one reason. Spam exists because it costs nothing. Spammers don't need a lot of people to respond to their spam. They just need 1 or 2 people. It becomes profitable because there's 0 cost associated with sending spam. Anytime, I've heard people call this the tragedy of the commons. Anytime there's a shared resource and it doesn't cost anything to use it, it's going to tend to be treated really poorly. Unless people go in and decide to take care of it. And in some ways, time and attention becomes a shared resource because part of what we do is collaborating with other people. Whatever it is you want to do, make the time to really do it and then know when you're done. This is a giant problem with email. One of the reasons that we have procrastination, one of the reasons that we have so many abandoned or poorly executed projects is because there are no walls to these things. How do you know when you have enough information to do your job today? Gmail. Gmail went down a few months ago, and people were having kittens. They completely lost it because Gmail was down. And I was like, okay, Gmail's down. You can't get email. What's the problem? Ooh, well, the problem really is that they're using their inbox as a to-do list. And they're using their inbox as a calendar, and they're using their inbox as an agenda because they never figured out how to liberate that stuff into other places. And at the end of the day, for all of the stuff that we claim is important, and let's just say, I mean, anybody who says they have more than 2 priorities might as well say they have more than 2 arms. Right? I mean, you still really only have 2, but now you're also crazy. A priority is something that you're willing to give up almost everything in the world for to make sure it stays alive. And if you think you have 27 of those, you're nuts. If you're having problems with deciding how much you're willing to talk to your coworkers about these problems, if you're having trouble with procrastination, if you're having trouble with any of this stuff because of X, really, really, really find out what that X is. Because in my experience, once you know what you care very intensely about, it's unavoidable to fix problems. Superficial problems disappear once you care very intensely about something. And once you align yourself with people who care intensely about the same things you do, that's when great things really start happening. The way that great things don't happen is when we kind of keep it to ourselves, and when we swallow it, and when we allow the quality of our work and our life to periodically go down the tubes because we just weren't paying attention to where our attention went. That defines who we are. These are limited resources and they go away. Attention is the raw material for what you're going to ever be able to make that's excellent and useful. And time is the resource for actually executing that. The problem is that if we are worried, anxious about stuff that's in our inbox, might be in our inbox, the tolerance that we have for unknown, ambiguous, or incomplete information starts to define our career. I think humans in general, and Americans in particular, love novelty, and we're very curious. And at the heart of it, every inbox is made out of the unknown, the ambiguous, and the incomplete, and it drives us crazy to not know the unknown. It drives us even crazier to not know whether we know the amount of unknown. Do you know what I'm saying? And that causes anxiety and fear. And the longer that you see that little badge that says 59 or 160 or 320, how long can you look at the badge that tells you how many unread emails are in there before you lose your mind and go check? Well, are you getting the complexity of that feeling? You are at once terrified to look and at once terrified not to look? Because it is a lot of questionable information. It's not bad. It's worse than bad. It's you've got to figure out whether it's good or bad. It's entirely incumbent upon you to basically monitor this thing that you have no control over. And we have a very conflicted emotional relationship as a result. And so this is why at the heart of it, Inbox Zero and all this stuff is ultimately about saying, well, wait a minute. Like, how much of this could I take the emotion away from if I had to? You know, how do I get to the point where I treat email the same way that I treat my mail at home, where I just open it and do something about it? If it's junk mail, I throw it away. But I certainly don't leave it in the box for 6 months.